you told me, yeah. But what's crazy is I remember when you used to hide your phone, playback. Here's a dog, always coming with some sad excuse, payback. Here's a dog. Do you remember that? 'Cause I'll never forget it. No, and it's the big playback, and you about to get it.
WIFTV PM.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things, what you're doing, and in my head I paint a picture. Well, since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. But won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Valerie. Did you have to go to jail? Put your house on up for sale. Did you get a good lawyer? I hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope you find the right man who'll fix it for you. And are you shopping anywhere? Change the color of your hair. Are you busy? And did you have to pay that fine that you've been dodging all the time? Are you still dizzy? Oh, yeah. Well, since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Oh, stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over there? Valerie. Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water, and I think of all the things, what you're doing. In my head I paint a picture. Since I've come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger hair and the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, why don't you come on over, Valerie?
WIFTBPM. WIFTBPM.
Live from What's in It for the Black Media Studio.
The problem in the past has been the man turning us against one another.
Take a journey with Salim.
Come with me into Muwakkil'S world.
We have been unable to see the truth because we have been fighting for 10 square feet of ground.
It's Muwakkil'S world.
Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Can you dig it?
Here's Salim.
Greetings, family. I am Salim Muwakkil, and I welcome you to Muwakkil'S world on this Return to Winter Wednesday, March 17th, the first official day of the $1,400 payment in the American Relief Act, signed by Joe Biden, one of his signature pieces of legislation. And it's the 194th anniversary of the founding of Freedom's Journal, which is the first black-owned media in this country, the first. And, of course, this is the continuing commemoration of Women's History Month. And today, we'll be talking to two dynamic sisters about all of those issues and things connected to them and many, many others as we get deep into Muwakkil'S world today. And joining me are Delmarie Cobb and Yaounde Olu. Both of these sisters are making return trips to the station, and for good reason. Delmarie is an extremely knowledgeable journalist, activist, political operative, whatever appellation you can join to her name. She's an analyst and a commentator who's backed by years of deep experience in all of those realms. Sister Delmarie has also been deeply involved in highlighting the noble history of Sister Ida B. Wells, and trying to make that history apparent to all of us who need to know it. Thank you for joining us today, good sister. Appreciate you. And also, we're joined by Sister Yaounde Olu, who's an author, artist, musician, astrologer, teacher, and editorial writer, and other things as well, editorial illustrator. She's also been here before, and she's backed by popular demand. Greetings, Sister Yaounde. Now, let's see. I know that we have Sister Delmarie with us. Good morning, Sister Delmarie. Are you there? Delmarie Cobb. I see Delmarie's photo, and she looks ready to go. We are ready for her to go. Huh? Can you hear me, Delmarie?
She has to unmute. Tell her to unmute.
Delmarie, unmute. Can you unmute Delmarie? Am I muted? No, I'm not muted. Delmarie, can you hear me? Hello there. Delmarie Cobb. Yes. All right. Well, we are intending to talk to these two sisters about many, many things. You know, Yaounde's been on and has woven aspects of astrology into the analytical hat that she wears, the political analyst hat that she wears. which is an interesting juxtaposition. Always very interesting to the listening audience. People always want to hear what Yaoundé is talking about. And just recently, just last week, for example, I just got a query from someone who is familiar with Sister Yaoundé, who wanted her to do a chart. So she's always provoking interest in her in her pursuits, which are many. And it's hard not to provoke interest when you have such a wide cross section of stuff that you're involved in. And Sister Del Marie, I was just reading some stuff, and it's often not acknowledged how the sister was influential in the campaign and in the tenure of our first senator from Illinois, who Roland Burris, who served. Sister Del Marie was very crucial, a crucial part of his campaign and his tenure. In fact, it's her language that made its way into some of the legislation that Senator Burris sponsored. So this sister has wide-ranging influence, often unacknowledged, and certainly she's not one to brag and make a big representation of it. But I think we need to acknowledge these kinds of talents that we have in our midst and learn from them, whatever we can. Try to gain some wisdom that they have accumulated over their years of dealing with this white supremacist monster that we have to grapple with, and that we've always had to grapple with since we've been here. So it is my intention today to get some of that insight from these sisters. And it's hard.
Salim?
Yes. Is this Del Marie?
I'm here. Yes.
Oh, wow. I'm glad you could join us.
There's always technical problems. I decided to leave and come back and see if that worked, and it did.
It did? Okay. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
I'm glad it worked. Glad you could join us. Now we're waiting for Yaoundé, but until Yaoundé joins us, until we get that straight, what have you been into? Let me put it this way. What are some of your assessments of the political landscape in this post-Trump era?
Well, everything is very promising. Certainly the most promising is that Trump is behind us to some extent, at least in the White House. And we've got to make sure that he's behind us, period, and not allow him to get a foothold back into the process at all.
You think that's very important?
Oh, I think that's very important. And what's really a shame is that the Republicans have no backbone. I mean, we're really seeing that they absolutely have no backbone, because they're letting this man bully them and taunt them and threaten them, and they're frightened.
Well, they're frightened because he has such a hold over the constituency, the Republican constituency, right?
But that's because they're not fighting back. They have gone along to get along. And that's how he was allowed to get the toehold that he has on the constituency. Because we know, his whole administration, his term in office was about lying. He's done nothing but lie to his constituents, his followers. And I call them followers because they really are followers. They're not constituents.
Yeah, I call it Cult 45.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah. So so in that case, in that particular, looking at it in that perspective, wouldn't banning him from returning to office make him more of a martyr for these cult-like fans he has accumulated?
Well, I don't know that we need to ban him, but we just need to make it so that he doesn't have an opportunity to win. What happens is, and what we see is, I was just talking to someone about this yesterday, is I jokingly say Democrats vote every 4 years and Republicans vote every 2 years. And that is how they've managed to get such a head start or advantage. you should say, over the Democrats, because that's how they won the White House, is how they've won Congress, is how they've won all the state legislatures, is how they've won the majority of the governor's mansions, because they vote every 2 years. And we are waking up to that. I think we saw that in 2018. We certainly saw the turnout this time. I mean, he got 75 million votes. The Democrats got 80 million votes. We can't discount that. Everybody wants to talk about his 75 million, but the 80 million is what counts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part of that is,
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Marie.
okay, and the other part of that is every time the Republicans lose, they double down. So they lost the White House, they double down. They lost this legislature, they double down. And this time, the doubling down is in the form of voters' rights and voter access. You see that that's a major move right now, is they're trying to make sure that the 80 million who turned out for Biden are handicapped and not able to turn out in that same kind of force the next time. We, on the other hand, when we have a victory or a defeat, when we have a victory, we sit back and look at our laurels and say, okay, we did that. And when we have a defeat, we walk away defeated. And so that's the difference in how they look at victory and defeat and how we look at victory and defeat.
So does that augur a victory for them in the next midterm?
Not if we stay awake, not if we realize that 2018 and 2020 were exactly what we need to continue to do so that we don't lose any ground, because we can't afford for them to take back Congress in 2022. We can't afford that. We've got to make sure that Biden has a majority the whole time he's in office, for us to undo the harms that have been done by the Republican Senate and a Republican president.
Well, do you think the stimulus bill will help achieve that end?
I think it will. It's certainly a good first step. And the reason that they wanted to have a bill so large is to make sure that it touched a little bit of everybody and could help everybody. I mean, it was the Republicans, which, I mean, is such an insult, that when the stimulus package was $600 a week for unemployment, it was the Republicans who were going around, and it was the talking point, well, the $600 means people won't go back to work. Why would you go back to work if you're getting $600 a week? So then it was decreased to $300 a week. So, I mean, they're so insulting on so many levels. If it comes to tax cuts, they can do that immediately. But when it comes to everyday, ordinary people, that seems to take debate and debate and debate before it happens. And Biden was able to get this done because we have a majority.
Well, were you surprised by the size of this particular legislation? I mean, it is pretty immense, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I mean, he decided, let's do this big. And he said it going in, let's do this big. And the experts are saying, the economists are saying that he's not going to oversaturate the market. They don't believe it's going to cause inflation. They believe because people are going to spend. What they've said when they've actually talked to people, working families, is that this money is going for bills, it's going for rent, it's going for food, it's going for doctor's visits. So the money is getting put right back into the economy and into circulation, unlike what they would have you believe, that somehow people are going to put this money in the bank and hoard it.
Yes. And I think that this bill is just large enough to be a serious threat to the Republicans' ideology. This whole supply side economic ideology could be toppled by this Keynesian and this attempt by Biden to put government to work for the people. I mean, once that once that dawns on people that this can be done, there's really no prohibition against doing it. Only this ideological blindness that the Republicans have installed, and quite frankly, the Democrats as well, the corporate Democrats as well, have installed this notion that we need to, this fiscal stridency, this fiscal, reaction and stinginess or niggardliness, let us say. So I think I think one of the reasons that the Republicans are so desperately against this is because it threatens the ideological foundation.
And this is the ideological foundation of the Democrats. I mean, it's about government is supposed to serve the people. Government is supposed to help people. Government is supposed to fill in that gap and for the needy. And that's what this is all about. And that's what Biden is doing. He's going back to what government's responsibility is. And I agree with you that once people are deprogrammed and open their eyes and realize, oh my God, my life is better. And why am I voting against my own self-interests? I do think that this has a major possibility of being a threat to the Republican ideology.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's why Biden is out in the street. That's why he's crisscrossing the country right now, trying to make sure people understand, as I heard one reporter say, shots in arms and money in pocket. And that's what my administration is about right now, making sure that you're well and making sure that you're well financially as well.
Yes, ma'am. I think we have Yaoundé with us, which is a good thing. Yaoundé, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Is that something in your background? I hear a lot of phones ringing and that kind of thing.
No, that's not my background. I'm totally silent here.
All right. So have you been listening to our conversation?
Yes, I have.
What a general assessment of this post-Trump political era? What's yours?
Well, quite frankly, I don't believe it's post-Trump. I believe that we have moved into. By the way, Del Marie, good morning.
Good morning.
Everything that went on before, I didn't hear everything, but I think that we have entered a new phase of political engagement because the Trump acolytes, that they are as dynamic and as adamant about what they feel as they were before the election. In fact, a lot of them still don't even believe that it's a legitimate, I don't want to call it regime, because his would have been a regime sort of, but I believe that right now we have entered a whole new phase of political engagement with people who are resisting traditional electoral politics as we have known it. So I didn't hear everything you said before, Del Marie. How does that jive with what you said?
No, I agree with you. I mean, Donald Trump has a following, and those 75 million people are not going to be deprogrammed overnight, but we're going to see some fall off. But I agree with you that the Democrats have to be very aggressive in being anti-Donald Trump, because he's going to do everything he can to insert himself into the process. And the best thing that ever happened to America is that Twitter took him offline.
That was really surprising to me. That was really surprising.
Can you imagine the interference he would have been causing and the chaos during this period of relative calm? I mean, can you imagine how calm? Look at the comparison. Just our own personal anxiety while he was in office versus now. It's just amazing.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
It really is. And the thing that's quite striking as well is the the universal support that this stimulus package seems to be garnering from Republicans as well as from Democrats. And it's going to be very difficult, I think, for the Republicans to counter that. Although much of the Republican Party is still in the sway of Donald Trump's spell, it's still going to be difficult for them to be disenchanted about this bill because it's so generous to them as well.
You're absolutely right, but my concern is that there's not enough public outcry about how uniformly the Republicans are rejecting all of this. It's amazing to me that they're able to get away with this without people responding, without people rising up verbally at least. But they seem to be getting away with it.
They may rise up electorally. We don't know yet. I mean, and then there are a lot of Republicans who are like turncoats and rhetorical turncoats, let us say. They're claiming, responsibility and they're getting plaudits for this bill, yet they were opposed to it.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
Well, the polls show that the Republicans are in favor. The actual voters, the Republican voters, are in favor of the bill. And even though the Republicans voted against it and it passed without any Republican support, if that becomes a pattern, if things that are good for the American people continue to be voted on by Democrats only, and Republicans are so busy being fixed in their position of being anti-Biden, anti-government, big government, all of those things, then the public will get to see it, and we'll see that translated in 2022, because that's what this is all about, 2022.
So can you tell whoever has it, who's listening to it on another device in the background, if you're listening to it on another device, just turn it down so we could just hear you guys talking.
Yeah, because there's an echo that keeps coming across. Yeah, that would be helpful. You were saying, Del Marie?
I was just saying that this is all about 2022. That's that. I mean, 2022 has started already, and that's where we are. And that's why Biden is touting this bill, because he wants to make sure that people understand it was the Democrats and the Democrats alone who made this possible. And if you're benefiting, it's because of us. And I think it was significant that today or yesterday, one of his first visits was a Black flooring company. He's going to the communities most in need, the communities that are going to benefit the most, and he's making sure that they know, we're out here, we're going to fight for you. That sends two messages. One, the message is we need you to vote again in support of Democrats in 2022. And two, we don't want you to stay home because it's a midterm, because that's where the drop off is in voter participation during midterms.
One of the things that really has always surprised me is the amount of support that that Republicans garner from women. It would seem that their policies are so anti-domestic, so anti-child care and whatnot, that women would be overwhelmingly supportive of Democratic policies. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Why is that? Why do you think? What is this cultural? Is the culture wars more important than these economic issues to Republicans?
I think it has to do with the patriarchy. I think it has to do with, I do. I think it has to do with how Republican women, and unfortunately some women in general, but how Republican women view society. And it seems to me that they're viewing society through the lens of their men. And if their men are wedded to these typically patriarchal concepts, then that's the direction that they're going in. I mean, it's a case of people voting against their own best interests.
Absolutely.
That's what we're seeing. And that's the only thing that I could attribute it to, that they're looking through another kind of lens.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and let's be clear, it's not women, it's white women. Let's be very clear that because they do what their husbands do.
Yes,
Black women don't necessarily do that. We are a matriarchal society, they're a patriarchal society. And so they follow their men's lead, whereas we have always been the leaders in our families and our communities. And so that's the difference. White women see, if I give you something, I'm taking it away from my husband. So if I affirmative action opens up the door for more opportunities for everyone else, then that's less opportunities for this white man who's taking care of me.
You just said something very,
absolutely.
you just said something very controversial, my dear Sister Del Marie, that we are a matriarchal society. There are many who will say that that's not true, or that that's one of the problems that we have, and one of the reasons why we've failed to achieve our optimum. How do you respond to that?
Well, we were a matriarchal society in Africa. In Africa, we come from an agricultural society where the men had many wives. And so the women took care of the family. The immediate families were headed by women, while the men had many wives because they needed many children to farm the land. So this comes from Africa. This is not, I know we've made it American and it's about the welfare system and all of that, but it was always this way. Now it is taken on many forms because of the government and other things and just everyday life, but that has always big mama, strong mother, strong auntie, strong grandmother, all of those things. That's why you had multi generations in one household headed by big mama or something like that. So this is nothing new for our community.
I think what's new is this. What's new is the dysfunction, because in this society, the males have not been able to assume the role that they would normally assume. So in Africa, we have the matriarch. In Africa, when you have the matriarchy, the men had something to do. But here, with the oppression, a lot of our men are tending to, I mean, like most of our families, from what I see, are raised in single female headed households. So you have, and then the men are not in the home, but they're also not functioning the way they would normally if they were in a society unencumbered, uninhibited. So I think it has to do with that. Yes, we do have a matriarchy. It is a matriarchy. There's no question.
You agree with
the
that?
majority of our, pardon me?
You agree with that diagnosis?
That the majority, that we are, this is a matriarchal society. I don't think it's I don't think because it's matriarchal that it's dysfunction due to matriarchy. I don't think that. I think that but
if the patriarchal role has been distorted, then doesn't that automatically give a certain kind of disproportionate prominence to the matriarchal role?
Well, I think, well, I can't say that. I will say that yes, I will say that matriarchy is pronounced, but I don't think that our communities are dysfunctional because that it is pronounced. I think.
As I say, this is a very provocative subject. I want to delve into it a little bit more, and we're going to do that when we come back from this break. We'll be right back.
Okay.
WIIFTBPM.
WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me. WIIFTBP. Media's just for you and me.
got to Kennedy King. So you remember Corey Brown?
I definitely remember Corey Brown from Morgan Park.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Murder, man. So I got it in with y'all one day before a game. And then y'all literally went out and destroyed some people by about 50 at Kennedy King. And I'll never forget, somebody shot a jumper. It came off long. And Corey will tell this story to this day. He says he went up, and I was in the stands. He went up for the rebound, and before he could jump, he said he felt a foot on his head. And it was you. And you caught it, classic P-Mac, catching it over everybody, putting it back in. He says before he jumped, he felt a foot on his head. And Corey was 6'4", easy.
On his head.
On his head.
Yeah, Corey, so he was 6'4", man. I used to just, I don't know, I had a knack, man. I was always uber athletic. Like, I was taught early, if somebody shoot, you got to come from the opposite side. I had a guy in my neighborhood named Wayne Irvin, legendary dude to us in our neighborhood. Played at Chicago State, played at Wyoming.
Okay.
Played against Patrick Ewing. He passed away a couple years ago, but went to CVS. He was a decorated player. A lot of people knew him. And he taught me early, like, you attack offensive rebounds from the opposite side. So if somebody shoot from the left wing, you crash from the right. If somebody shoot from the top of the key, you can crash because it can go either way and you can get it. I was so big and athletic. I used to get a lot of tip dunks. Like, for some reason, people never boxed me out. And once I got a running start, if it came off anywhere over the rim and bounced up, you was dead.
This is Eugene McIntosh, one half of the illest independent sports media outlet in the whole entire land, the Bigs. Check me and my player partner Terrence Tomlin, a.k.a. T-Time the Great, out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. on What's In It for the Black People Media Network.
Oh, please, don't you rock my boat, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. Oh, please, don't you rock my boat. Oh, no, 'cause I don't want my boat to be right. I'm telling you just I like it like this. Keep this just like this. And you should know by now. I like it. I like it like I like it. I like it like I like it. I like it like I like it like this. Yeah. By my soul. Oh yeah. By my soul. Every little action there's a reaction. Oh, can't you see what you've done for me? Oh yeah, I'm happy inside all of the time.
And we're back. Salim Muwakkil here in Muwakkil'S world. A world that is lilting to the beautiful sounds of Sam Trump's a cappella rendition of Bob Marley's Satisfy My Soul. Man, I love that jam. They do a magnificent job with that. And we are talking to sisters Yaounde Olu and Delmarie Cobb, and we were talking about patriarchy and matriarchy and that kind of stuff. We, got into that. And I want to continue in that vein because Delmarie, you were saying about Africa. Well, yeah, that's true. There was matriarchy in Africa, and I think it's very important to stress that because a lot of nationalists and other ideology-led black people tend to stress the fact that we come from a patriarchal line, and they stress that patriarchal aspect of it. But no, many cultures in Africa were deeply matriarchal. But those were these were varying cultures. Some cultures were matriarchal, others were patriarchal. It depended on the production mode for the most part. But I think it's important to stress that. still, I think we've been distorted in our socialization process by the plantation culture that socialized us. And so any kind of gender dynamic that comes out of that would seem to also have been distorted. Wouldn't you agree?
I mute her.
It all depends on, I mean, you have to look at it in terms of the our community here in America. I know from my family, my mother was a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked. Um, he came home, he brought his paycheck, he set it on the table. He expected her to pay all the bills with it. He didn't pay any bills. She did that. When he answered the phone, he said, "This is this is Johnny Mae's phone. This is Jimmy speaking." She ran the house, and it was clear, and there was never a problem. There was no, she did all the things she was supposed to do as the woman of the house and the mother and all of that and the wife, and there was never any problem. There were no arguments over that. The same way with my sister. My sister's husband worked every day. They were married 47 years. My sister had MS. She was an invalid for 30 of those years. My sister ran the house. My brother-in-law went to work every day. He did the grocery shopping. He did everything for her. But she ran the house. There was never any argument over who was in charge of the house. So, I mean, that's why I've never seen this. These were strong men as far as I was concerned. There was their manhood was never in question. The fact that they didn't have a problem with the woman running the house shows you that they were strong because they knew their role. Their role was the hunt and gatherer. I'm the hunter, I'm the gatherer. I bring home the bacon, you cook it. I mean, that was basically the role. And nobody ever had a problem with that. That's still a matriarchal house.
You know what?
I got you. I hear what you're saying. Yaounde, you were saying? Did you want
Yes,
to chime in on this?
yes. I think the missing factor in our communities today is that because of the dearth of men at the leadership of the so-called nuclear families, they don't have a role anymore. They're not
Right.
playing a role. And I think that's where the dysfunction comes in, and that's where the matriarchy is amplified, so to speak. If you want to look at it that way. In my family, I had a different experience. Both of my parents were in the home. Both of my parents had careers. Both of them worked, and both of them did whatever was necessary. Certainly, my mom did more of the domestic stuff. But my father did as well, and he did what he had a role. He did what men do. He made sure that the house was all right. If the stairs needed repairing, he would be the one to repair the stairs. He would be the one to take the family on outings in the car. My mother didn't drive, interestingly. So they had roles assigned to them. And there was no mix up in what those roles were. They seemed to agree on those things. In our communities today, when you have so many young people raised in without a male figure who is actually functioning as a male figure with a specified role, we do have a dysfunction going on. We have an imbalance, so to speak. And I think that's the difference. And when you have that imbalance, and you have females.
To what do you attribute that difference, Yaounde?
The difference in
that balance, and the fact that male is an economic. Is there an economic reason for black men being not as essential?
I don't say that the men are not as essential. I think that when we look at long-term oppression, and I hate to keep singing that song, but that's how it looks to me. When you have a society that has males, the first thing the males are going to do with each other is have a pissing contest, and we have males who are oppressed or in a oppressed position, or who was brought here as slaves, so to speak, or who brought here to function as slaves. you automatically have a situation where the whole group of men are disabled, so to speak, by the dominant society. And so the women,
Their patriarchal prerogatives are stunted completely.
yes, and so therefore the women who are not as threatening, at least they weren't. I mean, I think it's changing now, but the women who are not as threatening are they had to step up, and because they've had to step up, it has made them appear more masculine, so to speak, and it has pushed our men, or the men as a result of that balance, have taken a lesser role in terms of the family unit. So what's happening is
they've taken a lesser role in the family unit, but there are many who are saying not just a lesser domestic role, but culturally, men have been emasculated. That there's a lack of masculinity being expressed in the black community because black men have been demasculinized, so to speak.
I'm not
what do you think
sure
about
if it's
that?
a lack of masculinity. I think it's a matter of a toxic masculinity. Because if you look at rap culture, you look at what's happening in our communities, men still have a real control in certain ways consciously. The majority of women don't really think of themselves as dominating men. They do what they have to do because that's what they have to do. They had to step up and fill in that vacuum. But when you look at how males and females interact, women still very much look to men as leaders, even though many times they are not in the role of leadership. They have not actively taken the role.
Well, is that an aspirational gaze that you're talking about? I mean, there are a lot of women, a lot of female groups had these, these. They looked at men and they put them on thrones, so to speak, ceremonial thrones. And there are many who said, well, that was compensatory. That was an attempt to give these men that patriarchal aura that they lacked in reality.
I think that being part of the dominant culture, you can't escape some of the repercussions of that culture. And with that said, a lot of our women are just as, they would like for the men to be the dominant players in our communities. And I think what has happened since slavery, and I don't know what happened before, but I think that women still see men as the leaders, even though they have very often not taken the leadership role. And because of that, there's a mindset that they've adopted. Because I disagree with a lot of the people who blame the feminization of black men on black women's lived stance. Because if I recall, a lot of black women did not embrace that particular ideology. And a lot of black women are very traditionally male-centered in the way they think. It's
but
do you think that disconnect is the way they act?
Do you think there has been a feminization of black men?
I think that in nature, you always have the balance going back and forth. I think that if there is a feminization of black men, it is balanced by I won't say the masculinization, but I say that there's a balance that always occurs. So if women have had to be more dominant, that would place males in a more in a less a subdominant position, and I think that occurs probably naturally. With my worldview has to do with the fact that there are larger forces at work in the planet in the universe right now, and one of those larger forces is that this is the time for the rise of what's called the Venus principle. It is the time.
Say that again. Say that again.
The rise of the Venus principle.
Okay.
In other words, if you have a society where there is masculine dominance, at a certain point, like anything else, we breathe, everything changes, goes back and forth. There's oscillation that occurs. And I think that right now, this is the rise of women, because if you look culturally throughout the diaspora, as well as in white society, women are rising. Women are assuming
That does
dominant
seem to be the
positions.
case. Absolutely.
And so it's on in a larger sense, it has to do with forces that are outside of us. But at the same time, there will be another backward swing at some time in the near future, or the future. I can't say how near it will be, where once the feminization has reached an apex, then you're going to start the pendulum back the other way, and so masculinity will rise again. So I think it's just a natural oscillation that occurs.
All right.
And I
Sister
think
Del
it's
Marie.
also the way.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and I also think it's about how we internalize things. Women internalize things one way, men internalize things differently. For
But Del Marie,
instance,
let me ask you this broader
mhm.
question. Do you think there has been a feminization of black men? Do you think that process is happening?
Oh, you see it. I mean, you just see it. You see it. I mean, I'm not happy about it, but I see it every day. I mean, you see it in the way they wear their hair. You see, more men are wearing their hair like women. Men are dressing like women. I mean, you just see little things every day, and I just shake my head because
That
I don't
distresses
understand.
you? You're distressed by that?
Well, I don't understand any of it. I mean, I don't understand the pants under their butts. I don't understand any of it. So, so I just
Exactly.
sort of look
And
at
that
it
has
and
lasted so long. That trend.
right,
We,
right,
we, we didn't give it many years at all when it first emerged, but here it is. I think
right.
30 years later, just about.
I know, but
Right.
I say most of them look like runaway slaves, and that's what's even worse because here's something we should be running away from, we're embracing, and I just find it all confusing. But the bottom line is, I give the example of in my office, I've always had a lot of interns. And so my nephew used to work for me, and he noticed that all the interns were girls. And he said, all your interns are women. And I said, yes. I said, that's because women don't look at the job they do, and it's not an extension of who they are. Women just do the job. They do whatever needs to be done, and they don't see it as an extension of who they are. And so we wound up getting a young man. And the assignment I had at that time was I needed them to go and do some research. And so it was three young girls and the young man. They're all college students, and they did the research. And I needed them to do the research, then to make copies, and then bring them back. And I said to Stephen, my nephew, I said, I guarantee you the man won't be back after today. And he says, no. Why are you saying that? I said, because he's going to view the assignment we had for him today, his first day, as an extension of who he is. And this is beneath him. The girls are going to see it as this is what she asked me to do. And if it's what she asked me to do, she must need it and she'll explain it later. And he said, no, you want to bet? I'm like, yep, I'll bet.
And you
The
were right.
guy didn't come back. And that's the difference in women and men. We whatever the job is, we're going to get it done. And especially when it comes to our families, we're going to get it done. It
Well, is
can
that a
be beneath.
socialization? Is that a problem of socialization, right? That
I
men.
don't think I think it's just how we look at the world. I mean, and people need to acknowledge that men look at the world one way and women look at the world another way. It's not a
Then if men
I mean,
are being feminized, then perhaps that's a good thing, right? Then perhaps according to
no,
that
because
calibration,
there's still testosterone, and they're still going to think of an extension of themselves, and
testosterone
that's
poisoning, huh?
right, and that's one of the reasons why, men when they get lose their jobs, they become so despondent because they see it as who they are. They identify the job with who they are. And women, again, we don't do that. We, even though we may feel that's who, when I was a TV reporter and when I was no longer a TV reporter, yeah, I was upset and unhappy, but I went on to do something else. Because now that's over. That chapter in my life is over. It's time to do something else. It takes men a long time to get around to that realization sometimes. And that's just the difference. And when you look at
So
men
is
and
it
women,
genetic difference, or I mean a gender difference, gender
I think
based?
I think it's gender-based difference. And when, even if in terms of the emasculation that took place during slavery, I mean, we understand the emasculation that took place during slavery and continues to take place in one form or another. But the same way for Black women. I mean, we weren't emasculated, but look at what we were. We were used to make babies for the plantation owners.
That's
I
true.
mean, we were
Absolutely.
raped. We were on the auction block with our men. I always say that a Black woman is the best friend a Black man has, because we've done everything with them. We've spent every step of the way with Black men. We've not been treated better. We've been treated just as badly.
Yeah, as a unit. I mean, that's the way I look at it. I don't even make that gender separation unless I'm pressed to focus on that. But I think as a unit, we've been treated inhumanely, no doubt about it.
Right.
But there is this idea that that because of that despicable treatment, we need therapy. We need a therapeutic culture. We need a culture that focuses on reestablishing the patriarchal prerogatives of Black men, because they've been so absent in our historical development. And so that's kind of what was a foundation for the cultural nationalist movement, that we needed to bolster our patriarchal roles in a way that may be a bit excessive, but it was compensatory. It was trying to make up for a past in which we didn't have that role. Do you think that was the wrong approach?
Well, I see it. I mean, I remember those days, when the Black men were walking around and hello, my sister, hello, my queen, hello, my this, hello, my that,
Get behind
and
me, right?
treating and putting us on a pedestal. I mean, which is and assuming their role as leaders and providers of their families and their communities. That's part of what the Black Panther Party, all of that was about. But then we fast forward to, women being bitches and whores and hoes, I mean, and where did that happen? How did that happen? I mean, so you go from we're put on a pedestal when we were young to now the women our same age are considered nothing. I mean, and sluts and that's looked upon. I mean, even if you look at the artists, the today's entertainers, I mean, they're on stage, they're basically dancing as if they're, sex
I was
acts.
going to ask you about that, about the Grammys,
Okay.
which I'm sure you're talking about right now.
Yes.
May I chime in on this?
Yes, ma'am. Please, please.
Even though, Del Marie, even though there was a time, I was back there during those days when they say, my queen, my sister. Even though that was happening, the women were still pushed into the background.
That's right.
You just we talk about some of the people that, I mean, patriarchy, or I should say culture, is sometimes toxic itself. Just because it's part of our culture does not mean necessarily that it is good. And I recall very clearly that even during those times, they were queens, etc., but they were still doing the majority of the work, but then got a majority of the shine. And I saw the Grammys the other night, and I was just absolutely appalled at how we have devolved as women. But I had to understand where that was coming from. It's coming from, once again, as women, catering to what we think men want. So there is that overlying that toxic
But
masculinity.
why was it allowed and even encouraged by mainstream entertainment culture? It would
Well,
seem
I
that there
think
would
that
be some sort of censorious action on their part, right?
okay, well, I look at these things in this way too. There is a group or a subculture that does not want us to achieve and to remain a viable participant in society. So there are those elements that are trying to destabilize our culture, and one of the best ways to do that is to target, uh, um, hold the men down, and target the women, and allow for the destabilization of the family unit, which is what's happening, and that benefits some people. It really does.
I
So
agree. I agree with you 100%. And I've been saying the same thing for years. What you see, and I can almost tell you when it started, because I remember. I think the group, if I remember correctly, was Silk, and they had this. It was one of the first songs in terms of talking about women badly and showing a video that looked as though the women were performing sex acts. And I remember showing it to my mother. And somebody said, "You showed that to your mother?" I'm like, "Yeah, my mother was hip. I mean, she wanted to know, she wanted to stay on top of everything." So I was like, "Look." And I said, and my nephew, my mother, and I watched it. We watched the video, and we were just appalled, all three of us. And we're talking different age groups. And that was the beginning of women being treated as sex objects. And then you saw slowly women began to believe that if in fact they wanted a man and wanted to be attractive to a man, they actually had to assume that role. And so you started
But
seeing it
no, that
more
don't
and
mean
more and more.
that's not new. That's an age old condition, isn't it? Women as sex objects, and
Yeah,
wasn't
but
that?
what's new is the culture, the technology, the way to mass produce it, the way to mass sell it. That's what was new. It was on video. It was the first time we saw it was the beginning of music videos. So now we are seeing the women, and how that translated into the popular culture is, I jokingly say, while the clothes got bigger for the men, the clothes got smaller for the women. And so all of a sudden the men started wearing
It's a good
clothes
way
that
of
were
putting
three
it.
sizes too big, and the women were wearing clothes that were three sizes too small. And so that's how it became mass produced and became absorbed into the culture. And so if you would tell me that I would ever see a Black woman in the middle of winter with a little crop top coat on showing her midriff, I would have told you you were crazy. There's no way a Black woman's going to dress like that. But all of a sudden, that's how we were dressing in Chicago in the middle of winter.
Yes, ma'am. It is pretty distorted, no doubt about it. But I looked at the Grammys and I didn't look at it until I heard the uproar, and then I looked back at the videos and I saw this collaboration with Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion. I said, "Wow, man, this is a whole new level," and it's hard to figure. The way I figure it is, it's sexual explicitness in the guise of political progressivism. The people who are trying to be progressive, they think that this is Black people's authentic expression of their aesthetic. Because it's so popular, right? Cardi B is big time and all of that. So I guess they figure if they like it, man, I might think it's questionable, but they like it, so I'm gonna give it to them. And that's the way it seemed to me. Is that?
Well,
Do you
even
think
when
I'm
you
off on that?
well, even when you look at the beginning of calling women bitches and hoes, I never will forget the first time when that all started. And I never will forget Charlie Gibson on Good Morning America had one of the first groups who was doing that on his show that morning. And, everybody was sort of shocked at the beginning. And he said, he asked them about it. And I forget the name of the group now because I tried to dismiss them. and, and so he said, the guy said, well, that's how we talk in our community.
Yeah, right.
And Charlie Gibson looked at him, and I was just appalled. I was so angry. I was looking at it that morning, and I was like livid, because how dare you give the impression to the world that that's how our men speak to us, that we somehow, that's acceptable. And
ma'am.
all of a sudden I started seeing the men, even the clean-cut young black men, talking about bitches and hoes when they were talking about their girlfriends. And so I started approaching them and asking them, why are you doing that? And it was, the whole notion was, well, I'm only talking about some women. I'm not talking about all women. I said, no, that doesn't fly. You can't say that. But my question is, where were the black men who knew better? Where were the black men stepping up to say, no, we're not going to allow that?
They were overwhelmed by the power of popular culture. Let's discuss that. It's a very important question, my sister. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and discuss that question in more depth. Thank you. Be right back.
WIIFTVPM.
Welcome to Inhale, Exhale, you guys. We're your health home girls, Dr. Tanks Lee and Danny Time. We are being joined today by a guest, Samantha Allen, who's going to work with us today about attachment style.
Preoccupied, anxious, that's more so a child that comes from a background where the parent or the caregiver was kind of all over the place. You didn't know what you were going to get, so you were clinging to them when you did have their attention, because sometimes I might have it, other times I might not. Because that, it creates an anxiousness in the child, whereas when I get your attention, I want to hold on to it. I want to make sure. So I might cry when you leave, or I always want you around. I'm craving your attention. You know, mother-father relationship. The father passed away. Now the mother is over busy. She's working all the time. She doesn't have as much attention as she once had for the children. So now this created an anxious attachment style. Those adults grow up more, considered more clingy in relationships, always wanting attention or feeling like I need to make sure we're okay. Fear abandonment, fear that we might be breaking up or you might be leaving me alone. So I might check in with you more often. I might call you more. I just need to be assured that everything is okay with our relationship. That anxiousness part is the anxiety of the relationship, of always thinking something might be going wrong. If I called you, you don't answer. Are you upset with me? What did I do? Let's figure this out. Let's work this out. You're always kind of on edge about where your relationship will go.
You get a piece of paper, write down the event, the thought, emotion, and then logic. So in this case, say that your boyfriend didn't text you back. Okay, that's the event. What is your thought? Oh, well, he doesn't care. What's your emotion? I feel unworthy. What's the logic? Well, maybe he's asleep. So you gotta do that. That's addressing some of the symptoms. But overall, you want to engage self-love and self-discovery, right? And just kind of reprogramming your subconscious.
Peace, everybody out there. What's going on? This is Eugene McIntosh, one half of the illest independent sports media outlet in the whole entire land, the Bigs. Check me and my player partner Terrence Tomlin, aka T-Tom the Great, out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. on What's in It for the Black People Media Network.
Nothing even matters. nothing, 'cause nothing even matters to me. Nothing even matters.
And we're back. Salim Muwakkil here in Muwakkil'S world, being serenaded by those dulcet tones, those a cappella marvels that Sam Trump puts together. And we're talking to Sister Yaounde Olu and Sister Delmarie Cobb, getting a wealth of knowledge from these two dynamic sisters. And we were talking about some of the distressing developments in black culture. The example on the Grammys, the fact that a lot of our people are still dressing in weird ways, dysfunctional ways. Really, I mean, you can't even do crime correctly with sagging pants. You know, it would seem that would have worn them out. That they would have lost their appeal because of that alone. You know. But anyway, so you were saying, Delmarie, go ahead, my sister.
So I just remember when C. Dolores Tucker spoke out against it. When all this was first starting, and the rap artists jumped her. They all attacked her. And where were the men? I mean, again, the men should have come to her defense, and the men should have been the ones to say, no, this is absolutely unacceptable, that we're calling women bitches and hoes. I remember standing on the corner one day at the bus stop, and there were these two young girls talking and they were calling each other bitches. And there was an older black man, and he was pretty much a bum. I mean, really. And he was standing on the corner, and he started talking to himself. Can you imagine these women, they calling each other bitches? He said, what is wrong? What has happened to us? I mean, he was just upset, and he was just an ordinary guy. So what about the men, our leaders, who didn't step up, who decided that because these rap artists were making money, that anything they did was acceptable? And that's what happened. We saw all of a sudden, it wasn't about right or wrong, it was about money. And so because they were making money, they suddenly were catapulted to leadership in our community. And that's exactly what the white man wanted, is to have these people become our leaders. Because if you look at when rap began, I always say civil rights movement is always the third generation of any ethnic group that becomes Americanized, that really becomes a part of America. Our civil rights, 1965, if you looked at, we would have been the third generation from that pretty much. And instead of us getting to the point of being Americanized and successful, really being a part of the American dream, all of a sudden we uplifted people who were considering themselves gangsters, who were considering themselves criminals, and all of a sudden they became our leaders, the leaders to our young people.
Let me offer just a little bit of pushback to that, Sister Delmarie. I think much of what you say is correct, you know, in terms of our distorted values and whatnot. But there are those who would say that one of the reasons that they didn't speak up against the rather cruder and coarser expressions of hip hop was because they saw that happen in the past when our artists various blues artists, and Bessie Smith, for example, in the past, when they would talk these kind of gut bucket lyrics, and the way that they were denounced by the NAACP and other black organizations that seemed to frown upon these proletarian expressions of art. So a lot of black folks say, well, look, we're no longer going to denounce our folk artists, and then later on white people make them famous and make money on them. What we're going to do is we're going to embrace our folk artists, who are the hip-hop people, who are speaking the language of the street. We're not going to censor them. We're going to let them express it like and rather than come down on them, and then embrace them. And so that could have been their logic, rather than simply this kind of mercenary logic that you impute to them. They want to make money. I'm sure that was part of it. But I think there's also an aspect of this artistic integrity. People wanted the authentic expression of the streets to be available and accessible to people.
But they weren't calling white women bitches and hoes.
I'm sorry to say that again.
I said, but they weren't calling white women bitches and hoes.
Right.
That's true.
And may I say this? I think the whole thing points to the denigration of women, period. Because I mentioned earlier that Black women have usually upheld the men. And so even while the men are degrading Black women through culture, the Black women are reluctant to respond in a way that would be obvious. And going back to, for example, the Grammys, I mean, I've seen a lot of men complain about women with their 18-inch weaves and with their 3-inch eyelashes and bleaching skin, all this. They're blaming it. They tend to blame all of that on women when you look at Black men and who they tend to marry, they tend to hold up that image, as if they can get a white woman, or a red bone.
Red bone.
Well, I'm just saying the way it appears to me.
You're right. I mean, that's no doubt about it. I mean,
so
but there was attempts within hip hop, like Queen Latifah with her unity. And there was this era in hip hop where people responded to that. Public Enemy, X-Clan, these hip hop artists said, "Look, man, we shouldn't talk about our women like bitches and hoes." But they didn't last long.
It was so quick.
They had a little effect, but they didn't last long.
Right, you blink and it was over. So all I'm saying now is that what we're experiencing is pushback of the rise. Of the rise of women, but at the same time, those women who are moving to achieve, they still have families as an anchor, and quite frankly, I think that one of the best ways for us to counteract this terrible trend in our communities would be that we would refocus on our children, refocus on the families. Like a lot of times, I think Del Marie, you were pointing out that if men didn't see them, if they can't identify with a role, then they're not going to do it. So if women are the ones who are getting the jobs and who are taking over, it would seem logical that the men who are at home or can be at home would move up to take care of the family, so that we would not have these dysfunctional families. But that's not quite happening, and I think once again it goes to the deep running vein of patriarchy and the reluctance on the part of Black women to relinquish that notion.
The notion of patriarchy. One of the reasons, of course, is demographic. There are just not as many Black men as there are Black women. And so, especially if you look at the college graduate roles, you see an enormous disparity. And so there's no lack of reason why Black women seem to be moving into positions of prominence, much more so than Black men. Look at Illinois, for example. That's a perfect example. A similar kind of pattern is discernible in other places across the country, and that is for real. That's a demographic reality. I'm just wondering how because there is more than there is a patriarchal assumption that Black men should lead things in a way that they're not doing, and there is a growing a movement to try to re-masculinize Black men. Although hip hop is what you would call hyper-masculine, it was an attempt to do that. There are some who would say that, but I sense it. I see it in various movements across the country. There's this yearning to put to give Black men a more masculine identity. Do you see that as well?
Well, I don't necessarily see that, but part of being, as I was saying before about in my household, part of being a man does not mean you have to subjugate the woman to be a man. And it's about being partners. A relationship is about being partners. It's about being equals. It's about working together. It's not about one being better than the other or one being the master and the mistress. And when it comes to Black women, we have always, as Ionde said earlier, what you're seeing, and I talk about this with Ida's Legacy, my pack, is one of the things I often say is Black women have carried everybody else's water throughout history. Now we're carrying our own. And it's time for us to carry our own. And so that's what you're seeing.
But Del Marie, I mean, I think when you talk about these well-adjusted domestic situations, that's that's heartening. I'm glad to hear that. And there was a lot of that going on in our community, no doubt. But look at the statistics. 70% of our children are growing up in families that are single parent, and by just economically, that puts them at a disadvantage. And there's certainly some dysfunction there, right?
Absolutely. I always say that if you and I decide to live together and you're making $1 and I'm making $1, we together have $2. So we're going to do better together than we're going to do separately. And so that's why it's so important to have a family unit, is that together we're going to do better. You're not going to do better when you've got a woman being the head of house by herself. Everybody is struggling, and you're going to keep struggling, and everybody is depending on that woman. The sons, if you go to prison, it's the mother who keeps the family together, who's taking care of the children, who's going to the jail to do the visits, who then when the person gets out of jail, they don't have any place to stay and they come back and stay with them while they're trying to find a job, if they ever find a job. I mean, everything is falling on the Black woman. And so we have to see ourselves as partners. And even going back to the successful Black men who, soon as they make $1, they get a white woman. I mean, that is not who they've been. That's not how they were raised. They were raised in households with strong Black women. They are where they are because of strong Black women.
That's excluding popular culture. I mean, I often say that it's really amazing that many Black men in my era, we were socialized by Gina Lola Bridget and Marilyn Monroe and those folks. Those were the sex idols that we were aspiring towards. So it's really, in many ways, it's a wonder that we find Black women attractive at all. We were inundated with Marilyn Monroe, envy and all of that. So yeah, I hear you. But still, I mean, popular culture has had a very deleterious effect, I would say.
Well, one of the reasons why I like Russell Wilson, and I'm not even a sports person, is because this is the first Black man I know to leave a white woman for a Black woman.
Wow. The first one, huh? That's the first one that you've noticed? That's pretty significant,
And I was like, wow, he did that?
Yaounde, your reflections.
Well, as I consider all of this, I'm getting ready to say something that's going to be very, very unpopular.
You wouldn't be Yaounde if you didn't utter those kinds of things.
Now, I really think it's time that we realize how our coddling of our men and our and our taking the back seat ourselves is really deleterious in our communities. I think that as Black women, we are enabling our men regarding bad behavior, and that is, with that happening, you don't have anybody who's helping to control and bring things back to the center. So, for example, there was a story the other day about this man who had been in prison, and his wife got his baby mama got a check, the stimulus check. And so he actually came to that home demanding a portion of that check because he had one child with the woman. And he killed all of those. He killed 4 people because the woman, refused to give up.
Tragic story.
Right. So, but we look at that. We may look at that and be sorry for it, but we're not going to really look at the fact that as a society, we have we have made excuses for it. I mean, we all of our music, a lot of our music, our dominant music. There was music on the Grammys where they involved killing children, killing black people, and this is allowed. And like I
Brother
said,
Quabanasi Jaga talks about that all the time. You know, he was on his show
exactly.
talking about this killer music.
Yes, and we acknowledge this, but we ignore it and we allow it to be. It's just like traditionally we have upheld black men and have not held them accountable. So, for example, I've always said, you know, a black man can do anything and get away with it in the black community because black women are afraid to speak up and say we need to stop this behavior. We're not doing that the way we need to.
Well,
So
you're making the same complaint that Del Marie did about our reluctance, our reluctance to respond to the early denigration of females in hip hop, and you're talking about a continuing reluctance on our part to deal with this kind of murder music that's coming out of the community these days, and is widely available on commercial radio.
and it's not just the murder music; it's the behavior that comes along with that.
Right.
If you look in our communities, the majority of the crime, the majority of the murders, the majority of dysfunction is um, coming from our men, quite frankly. And as women, I don't blame them 100% because as women, we're enabling that behavior because we don't call it out. And the reason we don't call it out is once again going back to that notion that the men are right. It's the patriarchy, the fact that deep down inside as women, we still uphold our men as leaders in our communities, and we're afraid to speak out, or we're reluctant to speak out, or many times women are just reluctant to. I don't want to get crass here, but there are certain other things that they miss that they don't want to push away, even when they don't have the economic uh, factor that comes with having a man. So we have a sort of unspoken polygamy going on in our communities, where women are sharing men, and these men are really what like glorified pimps to a certain extent. Look at people like Snoop Dogg. I mean, and the comedian. They're talking about pimping. How can we allow that kind of thing to happen in our communities? But deep down inside, that's happening on a sub rosa scale throughout our communities, where women are sharing the men. The men are not upholding their side of things. Women are upholding their side of things in terms of trying to keep the family together and the children together, but they are at the same time enabling bad behavior, in my opinion. So I think what has to happen is what you talked about, Del Marie. I really believe that it's about partnership, and it's about reevaluating or redefining what a partner is, because you mentioned that if I make $1 and you make $1, we put our dollars together. The problem comes in if I'm a woman and I make $10 and you're a man and you make $5, you're not going to want to come in and put your $5 with the $10 and still feel like a man. You're going to feel that you're not upholding your part because you're not being a man, because a man is the provider.
So you think patriarchy is the culprit?
Well, quite frankly, I think people are the culprit. We're the culprit.
Okay.
We are.
But let me say, I think that much of what you describe is economically framed. I look at an economic frame. I think we're on the edge of survival. Many of our communities are perpetually on the edge of survival, and that promotes and cultivates a kind of predatory culture. And you find that no matter where you find black folks across the country, in certain communities, we in many ways, we've grown proud of it. I remember when I was in the service, you talked to a brother from a certain city, he would always point to the worst part of the city as where he was from, because that meant that, he had some kind of credibility. And that really was the part of the city where there was a predatory kind of existence going on, because people were in a state of lack. And I think that has distorted that has distorted much of many of our relationships, and I think resources. I think compensatory resources. I think that's why we should be much more focused on reparations and those kinds of compensatory attempts to supply our communities with resources.
Let me say this, Celine. And a lot of that goes back to, as a former educator, I can tell you that there's a strong anti-academic stream running through our communities.
That's correct.
If you speak well, if you hold down a traditional job, if you don't have street cred, then you are a sellout. And if you hold those ideas, you're not going to be the ones to do what's necessary to get the jobs that will be sustaining jobs. So a lot of our exactly. So that, I mean, if we would just even change that part of our outlook, it would, our communities.
But you can't exhort that. You can't exhort that change into existence, can you? Can you simply say, look, if exhortation worked with all of the churches that we have in our community, we'd be paragons of virtue by now, don't you think?
I don't think it's coming from church. I think there's a difference between churchianity and spirituality.
Churchianity.
I think that. I think that what we're not doing is looking at our value as human beings and the value that we have with each other and the responsibility that we have with each other to ensure the survival of our communities. Another way to look at this is, for example, in the broader community today, and they say the Trump people are ones with the biggest issue with this. We don't have people who are willing to do basically what's necessary to try to curtail this virus. People who won't wear masks, people who won't do the, just bare minimal things. So I think the macrocosm reflects the microcosm. In other words, what happens in the broader society is reflected in what we do as well. And in our communities, we're not really understanding how we need to enact behaviors that will bring out the best from our communities, and that seems to be happening.
And the other thing is that we're embracing the worst of everything. I mean, when you talk about, I used to talk to Vernon Jarrett and Cecil Partee and Gus Savage, all those guys from that age group. I used to talk to them all the time, hours on end. And one of the things that they talked about is when they were students in college, that the way to get the girl is you also had to be a straight A student. So it wasn't about getting the girl because you were a jock. You better, so it was Jesse Jackson. Remember, all these guys were honor roll students. They all got scholarships and things. They were, Jesse Jackson was a quarterback. I mean, remember, they were jocks and they were straight A students. And they all talked about, if you weren't a straight A student, the girl wouldn't even look at you. She didn't care nothing about you just being an athlete. And so that was our culture in the Black schools at one time.
It was also Malcolm. Malcolm kind of inspired that as well. Malcolm's erudition inspired brothers who wanted to follow him to be similarly erudite.
Right. And so all of a sudden, the more we assimilate and start embracing the worst of other people, we start losing the best of us. And that's what I see has happened, because that is not our history. This being the dumb jock and oh, you're talking white and all of that because you speak standard English, that is not our history. Our history coming out of slavery was to be successful, to be what we saw other people, to have what we saw other people have. And to do that, we needed to be successful in whatever way it was, whether it was W.E. Du Bois' success or Booker T. Washington's success. Whatever it was, whatever direction you took, it was about being successful.
Yes, ma'am. Listen to the
You know,
diction
I
of
agree
listen to
with
the
that.
diction of the early jazz vocalists. Boy, they were crisp in their diction. Yaounde, I see you have something to contribute. We want you to get in on that. We're going to do that right after we take this break. We'll be right back.
WIFTBPM.
Parenting in a Pandemic, powered by the Chicagoland Mom Squad, hosted by me, Tennille Jackson. Today's guest will be Beulah McLeod. We know her and love her first and foremost here at What's in It for the Black People Media. We also know her and love her in the Chicagoland Mom Squad. Her life's work has been about leveling the playing field so that no matter what a child's zip code or economic status might be, he or she would have access to high quality education. What principles and values have been the most important for you when it comes to raising your daughter?
First of all, consistency, discipline, boundaries with a lot of love, right? So from the time Asia was young, like she had a bedtime. We would
Say
do
that again out loud for the people in the back.
She had a bedtime. And no matter, it's interesting because my ex-husband and I have been divorced for like over a decade now, but we tried as much as possible to kind of mirror each other in terms of routines and habits, right?
Okay.
So if she had a bedtime at my house, she had a bedtime at his house. We tried to do that in tandem. Exposure is key. So exposing her to as many things as possible, as many opportunities as possible, allowing her to explore as many of her interests as she wanted to. And I think that's paid off because she's a creative child who now, and you know that she started her own business during the pandemic and just found really creative ways to keep going. So I think it's important that if children have interests, that you allow them to explore them because you never know where they're going to end up or what they'll land on. And she laughs to this day and is like, Mommy, thank you so much for just letting me try different things.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the green side of things. It's your man, Sadiq.
And Cassiopeia.
And we need you to like,
comment,
and share
that thing
every Tuesday and Thursday from 1
to 3 p.m. on
What's in It for the Black People Media.
My name is Cassandra J. Matz, current Village of Olympia Fields trustee and your candidate for Village President of Olympia Fields. I've been a resident of Olympia Fields for 28 years. I believe in building strategic partnerships, establishing governance boundaries, and have and will continue to dedicate my life's work as a respected and credible voice when it comes to decision making. Olympia Fields has always been a community of familiarity and comfort, and I want to make sure the village stays that way. On Tuesday, April 6th, vote Cassandra J. Matz for your Olympia Fields Village President. Paid for by Citizens for Cassandra J. Matz.
You were there for me to love and care for me when skies were gray. Whenever I was down, you were always there to comfort me. And no one else could be what you have been to me. You'll always be. You will always be the girl in my life for all time. Mama, you know I love you. You know I love you, yeah. Ooh, you know I love you, Mama. You're the queen of my heart. You're the queen of my heart. Your love is like food from the stars.
We are back. Man, I hate to interrupt that harmony, boy. I love to hear harmonious voices. Woo. That's Boys to Men, right?
Yeah, that's Boys for Men, but it's sung through Sam Trump's voice.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. Man, that's beautiful stuff. Let us go back to Yaounde, who was making a point. Yes, ma'am.
Well, basically, I think we should not forget, once again, that there are elements, superstructures, who are deliberately using culture to create dysfunction in our communities. I don't underestimate that. I recall some of you may have heard.
You made that point before, Yaounde. Can you be a little bit more explicit about who you think these forces are?
Some of the captains of industry. For example, there was I don't know how true it was, but there was a story that circulated about the fact that when prisons for profit, when for-profit prisons, when for-profit prisons came on the scene, I knew right away that was the end. That was the beginning of the end, because in order to maintain those prisons, you have to have prisoners. So there's a story that during that time that the captains of industry who ran prisons and what have you came together with top hip hop people and said, "We need you to infuse
That's an apocryphal story, my dear. I know the story you're talking about. Yes, ma'am.
Right. So whether or not
no one's been able to solidify or to verify that meeting ever really took place. It's apocryphal.
Exactly. However, what we can say is that the result, look at the result, and that's what's happening. For example, along those same lines, there's been the whole story about the plan to depopulate the planet. You know, that's been going around for a long time. Agenda 21 and a couple of other situations about depopulating the planet. Well, whether or not that's true or not, the fact of the matter is that it's happening. The fact of the matter is that the adulteration of our food, the adulteration of the environment, all of that is happening. Whether or not the conspiracies around it are true or not, the fact of the matter is these things are happening. And so what's happened with the culture, we can actually almost look back at gangster when the advent of gangster rap, and that was the beginning of the end. And I guess they needed to do that because with some of the earlier rappers, I mean, was it Ice Cube and Ice-T, F the Police and
the ISIS, the folks who they always put those kinds of frozen attributes because it meant that we were emotionally unavailable.
Right. Well, Iceberg Slim. I mean, that goes.
Absolutely.
So, so all I'm just saying is that to me, a lot of this goes back to social control, and social control is best done through popular culture. Popular culture. If we all of a sudden changed what people love in terms of popular culture, changed the tone, our communities would be altogether different. But that's not going to happen because those who hold the big bucks, whoever those individuals or entities are, they're the ones who control what's happening in society. There are no accidents.
So we are absolutely malleable. Human populations are absolutely malleable. Is that what you're saying?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Of
We
course.
see that with Trump.
Of course.
Trump's a prime example of that.
Of course.
Well,
that only took 5 years.
Right.
But
not even 5 years.
But 75 million did.
Yeah, that's right. An amazing amount.
And that's a lot of people.
Yep.
So it's about mind control. When you say mind control, people's eyes glaze over because you sound like you're coming from the Twilight Zone. But it's merely the idea of putting things in popular culture that will encourage people to embrace it. And that's what's happening right now.
But doesn't that?
I agree.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Marie.
No, I was just going to say, and I agree with you. I mean, we see that every day. I often talk about what I do for a living as an example of guerrilla marketing. I mean, when you take a person who has never run for office before, nobody knows that person, and 6 months later you got everybody voting for them. That's guerrilla marketing. You do that by mass marketing, and so we see that every day. We just don't think of it like that. So what you're saying is absolutely true.
Well, doesn't that dismiss there's some strange feedback I'm getting. Doesn't that dismiss the aesthetic preferences of black people? of black youth to say that everything they do is so malleable. They're being manipulated by other forces. It's as if we don't have any agency whatsoever. We're simply, fodder to be manipulated by those who have superior weaponry, superior propaganda weaponry. Is that it?
But there is some, one of the things I talk about all the time is we're looking at stuff that doesn't make sense. I mean, the example I gave earlier, wearing a little crop top jacket in the middle of winter when it's cold, being a slave to fashion, wearing your pants under your butt in the middle of winter, exposing your butt. I mean, that's a slave to fashion, knowing you got to walk differently, knowing you got to hold your pants up with your hand,
And that you
all
can't
that
run
kind
from
of
the
stuff.
cops effectively.
Right. Oh, well, they've got that down though. They know how to do it.
Oh,
And so,
figured that part out, man.
Amazingly, but the fact that on logic, it makes no sense. But the fact that we're doing it says that we're a slave to whatever it is out there that we think is hip or we think makes us somehow a fashion statement. And we could easily turn that around. I always say, if these same rap artists, like a Jay-Z, who you see him, wherever you see Beyonce, he's in a tux and a tie and a suit and all these things. And so are all these other rap artists. Sean Puffy Combs, when he opened his store, he didn't open his store in Harlem. He opened it on Fifth Avenue. I mean, so when you look at all these people, they're saying one thing in the music and living a completely different life in reality. And all they would have to do is flip that and say to these young people that, you know what's cool? Cool is dressing well. Cool is going to school. Cool is, that's all they would have to do. And it would flip overnight.
Aren't they reacting against that kind of advice? Isn't that the whole point of these rebellious fashion statements? Is that they are resisting this mainstream inclination?
But how is it individuality when all of you all look alike?
I agree. Yaounde may say it's the stars that are impelling them to do it. Yaounde, how do you weigh in on this dysfunctional fashion statements that we always make?
Well, let me be clear about this. I never say the stars cause anything.
I'm being
even though I'm an astrologer, I don't say they cause. I think that we're in resonance with our time. You know, that every day is not the same. So there. Different days are different eras have different resonances connected with it. But I agree 100%. Right now, I personally have seen rap artists who had very middle class white bread backgrounds who are pretending to be street thugs.
Right.
And that's because we have sold that image to our people. And yes, we're very malleable. That's who we are as people. We like to be like each other. You can be ostracized if you're different. So if we could get the ones with the money, the dominant ones, the Jay-Z's, if we could get people like that to all of a sudden have them do a different kind of thing, oh well, you know what'll happen? What'll happen will be what happened to NWA and the others who tried to do that. They will destroy you. The ones with the money and the power deliberately will bankroll whatever is the lowest common denominator. That's what's happening. Otherwise, someone pointed out that on the Grammys the other day, that all the men were wearing suits and all the women were wearing what looked like bathing suits. These images are not accidental. This is not something that's accidentally happening. There are people with money who control what the media does. The media is very, very powerful. And as in fact, all of us right here, we work in the media in one way or the other. So we know that controlling the images, controlling the output will have a light response, or we hope it'll have a light response. So that's what's happening, and I think that once again, if we could change the narrative, which means getting those people who are in positions to do the changes, like people denigrate Tyler Perry, they denigrate Oprah Winfrey. These people have a lot of money and they are in control of their own. But ironically, being those who are most control of their own, people hate them. I mean, they really rag on Perry, Oprah.
They do indeed.
And
yes.
And they're the ones that
why do they do that, Yonde? Why do you think they do that?
Once again, I believe that there are subtle forces in our communities that are trying to control the narrative. And in order to do that, you need to control what images and what ideas get out there. And if you have people who are going to put ideas out there that you don't want to get, that are in opposite to your goals, you're going to do what you can to keep that from happening. We saw what happened with us and with the Black Panthers when the FBI actually played them against each other. And they've done this over and over again. They did it with Martin Luther King. You get the people who have the most dominant effect on the community. If they're effective, then they're going to be targeted for defeat. It's just
you saw recently with the NFL deciding to partner with Jay-Z against Colin Kaepernick.
Yes.
And you saw that. And if it hadn't been for the social justice movement, if it hadn't been for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and these other things happening right before our very eyes, which reinforce the whole reason Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, we wouldn't be advancing on that issue now. Trump had framed it as being un-American. He had framed it as being unpatriotic. He basically was saying, "Go back to where you came from," and the head of the football league, he has succumbed to that. He has succumbed to that, and so their way to offset it was to all of a sudden join in partnership with Jay-Z, who then said, "It's enough for taking a knee. We've got to move beyond that."
Yes.
Instead of us fighting for Colin Kaepernick to get his job back. You can't sit here and tell me that you're for me, and the very person who is in the prime of his career, you have blackballed, and we know you've blackballed him.
Yes, ma'am. There are various opinions on that controversy and some discussions that Kaepernick had with Jay-Z, but that's another matter we can leave for another time. But Kaepernick's courageous activity kind of harkens back to the kind of courageous stuff that one of your champions performed, Sister Del Marie, and that's Ida B. Wells. And you have taken upon yourself to make her accomplishments a lot more visible to people in today's society. How's that fight going for you?
Well, I think it just was a matter of it all coming together at the same time. The timing is right, and it goes back to what Iunda said earlier. That is our time, and I think Black women are stepping into their power. And so here we had a woman who was so far beyond her time. I mean, in every way, she was beyond her time. She was beyond her time as a feminist. She was beyond her time as a journalist, as a strategist, as a disruptor, and a crusader, an activist. She married a man. I mean, that's a prime example. The man she married, Ferdinand Barnett, he was an attorney. He also owned the Conservative newspaper, which was the oldest Black newspaper in Illinois. And he sold his newspaper to her. He allowed her to do what she did. He allowed her to travel the world while he made the money as a lawyer and took care of the house. And she often said she never even thought she would get married or have children. And yet she found somebody who she was completely in sync with. And so that's what we're talking about in terms of partnerships and being equal and understanding that, baby, we're in this together. If you want to be out there on the front lines, I'm going to make sure you can do that with a clear head, because I'm going to take care of everything at home.
Yes, ma'am, and absolutely. I mean, Sister Ida B. Wells was an absolute dynamo in the struggle. It's amazing the kind of activities that she spearheaded and was essential in bringing attention to. So yes, we're glad you're out here making her contributions more visible. Absolutely. Yeah. So look, what's your assessment of what's going on? How are we? Do you project good things happening in the future? I mean, we got the stimulus bill. We have a so-called progressive administration that seems to be doing some pretty good things right now. Are you optimistic?
Well, I give the example of, I first met Joe Biden in 1988 when I was Jesse Jackson's traveling press secretary, and he was actually just about to drop out of the race at the time, the presidential race. And then, as we know, he ran again in 2008 and dropped out. And here he wound up being the youngest U.S. senator and the oldest U.S. president. And he had 30 years to visualize what kind of president he wanted to be. He also had an opportunity to play second fiddle to a black man. So that means he has a perspective that very few white men will ever have. And so I think what we're seeing is Biden is the right man for the right time. That Biden 30 years ago may not have been the right man. He's now, he's gone through the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas. He's gone through the death of his son, the death of his wife and his daughter. I mean, all these things he's gone through, I think, have made him the person he is now. And this was the person we needed for this time. And the pressures that we're getting, that he's going to have from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and we know that the moderate wing is going to be fighting every step of the way. But the fact that they're there,
Joe Manchin,
and it's right. But the fact that the progressive wing is there, the progressive wing is active, and they're going to push him. And I think this is a great time for us, and we have. I don't fall in love with any politician. I never fall in love with any of them, because the moment they do something wrong, I'm going to call them on it. And that's why I can't fall in love. But the bottom line is, we've got to also make sure that we help him, and help him by making sure we don't lose Congress in the midterm, and that we have an opportunity to do well for the entirety of his administration, because we saw what happened in the Obama administration when the midterm came in and we lost Congress.
Thank you, my dear. Yaounde, quick, because we only have a little bit of time. What's your assessment of our future prospects?
I agree with everything that Del Marie said. I also agree with your notion of reparations. But I also believe that if you are going to dress up a pig, it's still a pig if you have fundamentally changed, the character of that which we're looking at. I believe that we are on the verge of a renaissance, and I think that a lot of times diamonds are created under pressure, and that because of the challenges that we're going through, it's going to cause us to either sink or swim.
All right.
And I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic looking at what's happening around us. I think we're going to swim. I think that women, and in particular Black women, are going to have a great deal to do with the direction that our community goes in. And I certainly hope that our men are able to come along with us in partnerships, because if Biden, no matter what Biden does, no matter what the Republicans do, if we don't get our own house in order, all of it's going to be nil.
Thank you, my sister. I appreciate it. You're talking about a breaststroke, I think. All right, family, I'm glad you were here to hear this dynamic conversation, and I hope that you got as much from it as I did. Until the next time, peace.
WIFTV PM.